The worst insult of my life happened at my sister's wedding. My mother stood up, pointed directly at me, and told the groom's entire family, "Don't mind her. She just cleans houses." Everyone laughed. Well, almost everyone. One woman sitting at the table suddenly stopped smiling. She stared at me so intensely that the entire room began to feel uncomfortable. Then she quietly whispered, "That can't be right." My father chuckled and said, "Trust me, it is." The woman slowly stood up. Her face had gone completely pale, and the next words that came out of her mouth turned what was supposed to be my parents' perfect wedding weekend into absolute silence. "Are you telling me this woman is Claire Bennett?" And before we continue, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more powerful stories like this. And I'm always curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. I love seeing just how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to the story. If you ask my parents, I was the family disappointment. Not because I got into trouble or made terrible decisions, but simply because I didn't follow the path they had chosen for me. My younger sister, Emily, was their success story. She was a straight-A student, had a promising corporate career, a perfect engagement, and what seemed like a perfect life. At least, that was how my parents saw it. Meanwhile, I ran a cleaning company, and in their minds, that was all I would ever be. It didn't matter that I had spent 10 years building the company completely from scratch. It didn't matter that I worked weekends, holidays, early mornings, and countless late nights. To them, I wasn't a business owner. I was simply the daughter who cleaned houses. Over time, I learned that arguing with them only made things worse, so I stopped trying to explain myself. Whenever relatives asked what I did for a living, my mother would smile politely and say, "Oh, she cleans homes." That was the entire explanation. There was never any mention of my business, my employees, or the years of hard work behind it. To them, I simply cleaned homes. By the time Emily's wedding rehearsal dinner arrived, I expected more of the same. The event was being held at a beautiful restaurant downtown, and both families had gathered for the evening. The groom's parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, and other relatives were all there. Everyone seemed excited and happy about the wedding. Everyone except me. Family gatherings had always followed the same uncomfortable routine. At first, everything went smoothly. People chatted, drinks were served, and stories about the couple were shared around the table. Then the introductions began. My mother stood up and started introducing different members of our family to the groom's relatives. When she finally reached me, she smiled. It was that familiar smile, the one I had learned to recognize years ago. "This is our other daughter, Claire." Then she laughed softly before adding, "She cleans houses for a living." A few people nodded politely, clearly unsure of how to respond. The conversation could have ended there, but my father wasn't finished. "We've pretty much given up on her," he joked, laughing as if he had just said something clever. Several people around the table shifted uncomfortably. I forced a small smile and looked down at my plate. Same story, different audience. Then, from the far end of the table, I noticed something strange. One woman had completely stopped smiling. She was staring directly at me, and suddenly she looked like she had just seen a ghost. For a moment, I wondered if I was imagining her reaction. The woman sitting across from the groom's family had gone completely still. The smile had disappeared from her face, and her eyes remained fixed on me. Then, she slowly placed her wine glass on the table. "Claire?" she asked. I blinked and looked at her. Yes, there was something strangely familiar about her face, but I couldn't figure out where I had seen her before. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "Have we met before?" Before I could answer, my mother laughed. "Oh, I highly doubt it." The woman briefly looked toward my mother, but my mother continued. "Claire keeps herself busy cleaning houses all day. She's never really been interested in much else." A few awkward chuckles moved around the table. I could feel my face getting warm, but the woman didn't laugh. Instead, she continued studying me. "Cleaning houses," she repeated. "That's right," my father said proudly, as though he were confirming some embarrassing fact. "Our younger daughter is the ambitious one." Emily lowered her eyes toward her plate. Even she seemed uncomfortable with the way our parents were talking about me. The woman turned her attention back to me. "What part of town do you work in?" she asked. "All over the city," I replied. She frowned slightly before asking another question. "Do you work independently?" I hesitated for a moment. "Not exactly." My mother sighed dramatically. "She's just being modest." The woman completely ignored her. "What company do you work for now?" Suddenly, everyone at the table seemed to be listening. I wasn't sure why such a simple question had captured their attention. "It's called Premier Home Services." The moment I said the name, The woman's eyes widened. Her husband immediately looked up. The groom looked up too, and even two relatives sitting nearby stopped their conversation. The woman stared at me for several long seconds. Then she looked at her husband and slowly turned her attention back to me. I recognized that expression. It was the look someone gets when two completely unrelated pieces of information suddenly make perfect sense. My parents were still smiling, completely unaware of what was happening. The woman lowered her voice. "Premier Home Services," she repeated. "Yes." She swallowed hard before quietly asking, "Wait, you're the owner?" For several seconds, nobody said a word. I looked at the groom's mother, and she stared back at me. Then my father suddenly laughed. "Owner?" He shook his head. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." But the woman didn't even look at him. Her attention remained completely focused on me. "You're Claire Bennett?" she asked. "Yes," I answered. "I founded Premier Home Services." I nodded slowly. The entire table had gone silent. My mother looked completely confused, as if she had suddenly found herself in a conversation she didn't understand. The groom's father leaned forward in his chair. "Wait a minute," he said. "Premier Home Services? The company that handles both residential and commercial properties?" Another relative looked at me in surprise. "That's your company?" I could feel dozens of eyes turning toward me. "Yes," I replied. The groom's mother slowly leaned back in her chair. "I knew I recognized you." My parents exchanged confused glances with each other. Meanwhile, I sat there quietly, trying to understand what was happening and why this woman seemed to know so much about my company. Something about the way everyone was looking at me felt strange. For the first time that evening, someone actually seemed interested in what I did. Not embarrassed by it, not dismissive of it, genuinely interested. The groom's mother smiled. "About 3 years ago, one of my closest friends hired your company." I blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "She couldn't stop talking about the quality of your service." A few family members began whispering among themselves. My mother looked increasingly uncomfortable as the groom's mother continued. "I also remember seeing an interview with you in a local business magazine." That was when my father's smile finally disappeared. Business magazine? I almost laughed. My parents had never read a single article about my company. Not one. Years earlier, I had started with nothing more than a mop, a vacuum cleaner, and an old secondhand. I cleaned every house myself. Some days I worked 12 hours straight, sometimes even longer. Eventually, I hired someone to help me. Then came supervisors, managers, and more employees. The company grew slowly, one client at a time. But my parents had never asked about any of it. As far as they were concerned, I was still just the daughter who cleaned houses. Nothing more and nothing less. Then the groom's father looked directly at me. His expression was thoughtful and genuinely curious, and the question he asked next made the entire table fall silent. "Exactly how large is your company today?" The room became so quiet that I could hear people placing their glasses back on the table. Everyone was waiting for my answer, including my parents. I took a small sip of water before responding. "We currently have 43 employees." Nobody reacted at first. Then several people blinked in surprise. The groom's father leaned back in his chair. 43. I nodded. "We also manage several commercial properties in addition to our residential clients." Across the table, my mother's expression changed. For the first time that evening, she looked uncertain. The groom's mother exchanged a quick glance with her husband. "I knew it," she said quietly. My father forced a small laugh. "Well, that's nice." Nice. That single word almost made me smile. 10 years of work, thousands of clients, dozens of employees, countless hours of sacrifice. And somehow to him, it was still just nice. The groom's father wasn't finished. "What made you start the company?" I shrugged. "Honestly, necessity." A few guests smiled. "When I was 22, I couldn't find a job that paid enough to cover my rent, so I started cleaning homes myself." Several people nodded. They understood the situation. I worked alone for almost 2 years. Then I hired my first employee. The groom's family listened carefully. My parents remained completely silent. After that, things started growing much faster than I expected. The groom's mother gave a quiet laugh. That's one way to describe it. Everyone looked toward her. She smiled before continuing. "Our property management group actually discussed hiring Premier Home Services last year." The entire table froze. My sister's fiancé nearly dropped his fork. Even Emily looked genuinely shocked. My father's eyes widened. "You were considering hiring her company?" he asked. The groom's father nodded. "Absolutely. They have an excellent reputation." For the first time in my life, I watched my parents struggle to find a way to minimize what I had accomplished. Every attempt to dismiss my work suddenly sounded ridiculous. Then the groom's mother slowly turned toward them. Her smile disappeared, and what she said next completely changed the atmosphere in the room. "I have to ask something. Why do you talk about your daughter like she's someone you should be ashamed of?" The question hung in the air. Nobody answered. Not my mother, not my father, not even my sister. For the first time all evening, there was nowhere for them to hide. The groom's mother didn't sound angry. She sounded genuinely confused. "I don't understand," she continued. "Your daughter built a company from the ground up. She employs people. She created opportunities for dozens of families. Why do you talk about her accomplishments as though they're embarrassing?" My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. My mother simply stared down at her hand. Neither of them seemed to have an answer. Around the table, several guests quietly nodded in agreement. The groom's father smiled at me. "Frankly, that's impressive." A few others echoed the sentiment. For years, I had imagined standing up to my parents, proving them wrong, and finally forcing them to acknowledge everything I had accomplished. But now that the moment had actually arrived, I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved. The recognition wasn't coming from me. I wasn't defending myself or demanding anyone respect me. It was coming from people who had actually taken the time to listen and understand what I had built. Across the table, Emily suddenly spoke. Her voice was quiet. "You know, I've always admired what Claire built." Everyone looked at her, including me. She gave me a small smile. I just never said it enough. For a second, I didn't know how to respond. Then I smiled back. "Thank you." The tension in the room finally began to fade. Conversations slowly restarted. People relaxed, and the celebration gradually returned to normal. Before dinner ended, the groom's mother stopped beside my chair. "It was a pleasure meeting you," she said. "You too." She smiled warmly. "You should be proud of what you've built." As she walked away, I looked across the room at my parents. Neither of them looked angry. They simply looked thoughtful. Maybe, for the first time, they were finally seeing me clearly. Not as the daughter who cleaned houses, but as the woman who had built a successful business from nothing. And honestly, that was all I had ever wanted. Because for years, my parents had seen someone who cleaned houses